Guys, everyone is talking about the wrong playoff sleeper. The Hornets are getting all the buzz as the favorite young offense, the Timberwolves are the contender nobody respects, the Lakers have the star power, and people are even making cases for the Suns, Bucks, and 76ers with stars getting healthy at the right time. But there's one team nobody is talking about. A team that has come out of nowhere before and might be ready to do it again. And that's the Miami Heat. Right now, the Heat are on a 6-game win streak. They've beaten some key teams along the way, and they've quietly moved up to the 6th seed with a chance to climb even higher. And the funny thing is, earlier in the season, Miami was getting national attention for their new offense. But the real story this year has been their defense. The Heat are 4th in defensive rating. They're one of the most disruptive, physical, and unique defenses in the league. And when you look at all their pieces, well, it starts to make too much sense. You have Erik Spoelstra, widely considered one of the best coaches for nearly 2 decades. You have Bam Adebayo anchoring everything on both ends, even dropping 83 points. Davion Mitchell at the point of attack, Tyler Hero scoring in bunches, and a host of players that fit perfectly into the way Miami wants to play. I mean, just last year, we saw Indiana surprise the league with a playoff run fueled by their defense, tough shot making, and a unique twist in pressing relentlessly. Miami certainly fits that profile this year. An elite defense, unique principles, and one big twist. They use zone defense more than anyone else in the league. So in this video, I want to break down what the Heat are actually doing defensively, their gaps, their closeouts, their zone, the entire system, and why it might make them the most dangerous dark horse headed into the playoffs.
Oh man, what a defensive play. Tremendous defense. Wow.
Now, before we even get to the scheme or their zone, you have to understand the mentality of the Heat. And I know Heat culture gets thrown around a lot, but so many players who have played for them say the same thing. It's just different playing there. In fact, I'll let Erik Spoelstra himself define the Heat culture for you.
Has been the toughest, nastiest, best conditioned, most professional, least liked team in the league.
And when you watch them play defense, well, those qualities really stand out. They're physical, they're tough, they're willing to take a charge, to do whatever it takes. But the most interesting thing about the Heat defense isn't really their toughness, it's how they're playing it. And probably most interesting is their use of zone defense, because they've utilized it more than any team this year, and it's not even close. And their zone is pretty unique. At its core, Miami plays a 2-3 zone. But what makes it special is how they use it on the perimeter. Their guards and wings are constantly bumping into and playing those passing lanes, really emphasizing deflections and 3-point coverage. And that really short circuits a lot of NBA offenses, because so much of the league today is built around quick ball movement, trying to generate open threes or long closeouts to attack. But Miami's zone makes those reads really uncomfortable. Those perimeter defenders are constantly getting hands on passes and forcing teams to think twice and stall out. So what ends up happening is offenses start to feel like the best option is to drive. But when they do that, well, you're driving right into the second strength of their zone, and that's Miami's rim protection. Usually when Miami goes zone, it's when Kellen Ware is on the floor, who is going to be anchored near the basket almost at all times and does a great job protecting it. So while the perimeter defenders are disrupting passing lanes, Ware is sitting right there making sure nothing easy happens at the rim. Which leads us to the third strength of their zone, because if you can't move the ball easily on the perimeter and you can't get anything at the rim, well, you end up living in the mid-range, and that's exactly what Miami wants. Modern NBA offenses are built around threes or layups, so when you force teams to operate in the middle of the floor, well, it really disrupts their rhythm. Because of course every middle school coach knows, get the ball to the high post to beat a 2-3 zone. But that's exactly what Miami wants you to do. Try and operate from the mid-range.
No, God, please.
And so often when teams employ that, well, they're getting some of the worst shots in the game. Short pull-ups, push shots, and mid-range jumpers. And I'm sorry to say, but long gone are the days of those mid-range assassins in the league. And on top of all that, it's unique for NBA players to see so much of a zone. and the changeup itself can throw the teams off. It's almost like throwing a curveball after throwing a bunch of fastballs. NBA offenses get so used to attacking man-to-man, when Miami suddenly drops into a zone, well, you'll see possessions where teams hesitate, make awkward passes, or turn the ball over in ways you almost never see. So Miami is disrupting the perimeter. They have their rim protection anchored, they're funneling offenses into the mid-range, and they're effectively breaking an offense's rhythm. But there's still one piece we haven't even mentioned, because if you try and isolate from the perimeter, well, you're basically looking at multiple defenders loaded up at you. And that's not just their zone principle either, it's actually something Miami uses a lot in their man defense as well. Because even in their man, they're playing heavier in the gaps than almost any other team in the league. And that gap help is really the foundation of their entire defensive system. Because when Miami does play man-to-man defense, you're constantly seeing defenders shrinking the floor, sitting in gaps, taking away driving lanes, and making it really difficult for ball handlers to get to the paint. So just like we saw in their zone, those gaps are protecting the rim and pushing offenses into specific types of shots, usually those mid-range jumpers. But I should mention those gaps aren't just passive and used to stop drives, they're also dangerous for ball handlers because Miami's defenders are constantly swiping in at the ball, getting deflections, and sometimes even coming from the blind side to get those steals. And in fact, that blindside steal has quickly become one of my favorites this year because when you turn your head against a good defense, well, you should have to pay for it. Now, you might be wondering, in a league that prioritizes three-point shooting so heavily, how can Miami get away with sagging into the gaps like this? Well, that answer has to do with how aggressive they are at closing out to shooters. They're not afraid to run the shooters off the line, fly by, and contest at the point of release. A lot of times you'll even see them be the second jumper, meaning they leave their feet after the shooter is already in their shooting motion, which allows them to get an even harder contest at the release, which really matters to their defense because while the NBA loves three-point shots analytically, there's actually a big difference between contested and uncontested threes. This season alone, players are shooting 40% on open threes, but only 33% on contested ones. And Miami is giving up the second most contested threes in the league. So you might be able to shoot threes against Miami, but they're going to be highly contested. So their gaps are used not only to protect the paint, but to aggressively close out to make sure those threes are rarely lethal. And you can certainly tell how much they care about contesting shots because it's almost comical how many times you see multiple defenders contesting the same shooter. But there's one more wrinkle Miami uses that's pretty interesting. Sometimes they'll even help from the strong side corner, which is a concept most NBA teams try to avoid at all costs because of how valuable corner threes are. But the Heat can get away with it because they are often using what's called a peel switch, meaning the on-ball defender will leave his man to close out to the corner. And that quick exchange can sometimes even surprise offenses into turnovers. But to clarify, the Heat are really only using this concept for those corner threes. And so when you zoom out and you combine these defensive principles with the personnel Miami has defensively, well, it starts to make a lot of sense to why this system works. It really all starts with the point of attack in Davion Mitchell, a player we've broken down in the past, but he's one of the toughest on-ball defenders in the league. He does a great job at speeding up ball handlers and forcing them out of what they're trying to run. You can see it in this play here. The Rockets are trying to run a set for Kevin Durant, but Mitchell's pressure causes Shepherd to abandon the play entirely. Now he's driving into the teeth of the defense, Miami collapses, the ball gets kicked out, and suddenly, instead of running a set for Durant, the Rockets are stuck with 7 seconds on the shot clock and Amen Thompson trying to make a play. Even though Houston gets the foul, Mitchell's pressure turned a set play into a late clock bailout. Now behind that pressure, you need some rim protection, and you get that with Bam Adebayo, the versatile anchor of the system, and Kellen Ware, a true rim protector. Bam, of course, is even more than a rim protector, able to switch onto anyone, clean up every mistake, and do all the little things. But Miami also has a bunch of really solid wings and guards who fit this system perfectly. Larson really stood out watching the film. He's excellent at chasing players off the ball, getting through screens, and even holding his own in isolation. Drew Smith is another guy who can pressure the ball and get after it defensively at the point of attack. And even players like Kasparis bring defensive intensity and make effort plays. And we haven't even added players like James, Wiggins, Powell, and suddenly Miami has a roster filled with guys who can execute their defensive style to a T. And when you combine that personnel with the principles we just talked about, well, you start to see why this defense could have a long playoff run. But there are a few other wrinkles that make Miami even tougher to attack. First, they rotate relentlessly on the perimeter. The Heat do a great job of flying around, contesting shots, and covering for each other. You'll also see the Heat occasionally use full court pressure, especially to limit key players' touches. They did this in recent games to Cade and LaMelo. It's not something they do all the time, but it's another way they can disrupt the rhythm of an offense. And then there's the way they handle some of the main actions offenses run today. Take ghost screens, for example. A lot of teams get confused defending these. You'll see miscommunications about whether to stay or switch, but Miami keeps it really simple. They almost always switch them immediately, which prevents any confusion and lets them stay organized on the defensive end. And they're not afraid to mix up coverages, make some plays, and use some calculated risks in their defense. Which is why when you put all these pieces together, the physical culture, their use of zone, their gaps, their personnel, and their execution, you start to see why Miami might be one of the most dangerous teams nobody is talking about headed into the playoffs. And a big part of this run will start at the point of attack, especially with Davion Mitchell. So if you want to see a full breakdown of his defense, you can check out that video as well. And as a reminder, as we get into March Madness and the NBA playoffs, there's going to be a lot of things to cover defensively, so make sure you're subscribed. And as a reminder, I'll be posting daily film clips and breakdowns on Twitter or X, and doing even bigger deep dives on my Substack that don't always make these full videos. So if you're interested in more defensive analysis throughout these playoffs, that's where you'll be able to see a lot of it. Thanks again for watching. As always, I'm Coach Mike with Lockdown Defense. Keep up the hard work.